Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road as we continue our series, Street Smarts from Proverbs. And to help me do that is the founder of the Old Wilson Center, Shirley Woods. Shirley, thank you for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
And Chief Meteorologist Emeritus and Director of Community Outreach for Parkview Health, Curtis Smith. Thank you for being here, Curtis.
Thank you, Mitch.
And the founding pastor of Grace Christian Church, the fastest growing church in America, and it happens to be in Kendallville in Indiana, also home of the famous Jim's Pizza.
Yes, yeah, it is.
And world-renowned softball coach, I might add.
I'd like to
Chris
meet him.
Mosley.
Oh.
I want to read something to you guys. We're going to talk about what's fair. In Proverbs, it's called equity. And I just think this is fun. One of the first phrases that we learned to utter in elementary school is, "That's not fair." A slick 5-year-old street smart boy beyond his years devises a way to commandeer another boy's favorite toy during kindergarten playtime, and the victim shouts, "That's not fair." During a second grade recess kickball game, the runner on third base steals home as the ball bounces from the pitcher's hand. Every other base runner stays on their bag, and the opposing team shouts, "That's not fair." Fast forward to 5th grade school play tryouts. The teacher's pet connives away the lead role from the girl who has diligently practiced her lines and was obviously better prepared. She goes home to her parents and cries, "That's not fair." At the conclusion of middle school basketball team tryouts, both the A and B team members are listed on the locker room doors. Several of the boys see their names printed under the B team heading and they say, "That's not fair." Homecoming arrives. The ridiculously advantaged girl wins yet another coveted crown, and the other girls on court say, "That's not fair." Entering college, a young man's name is somehow misplaced by the admissions office, resulting in an austere assignment to the dorm with no air conditioning. If that's not bad enough, he also gets the non-accommodating class schedule with the 8 a.m. world history assignment. And he says, "That's not fair." A loyal employee of 20 years loses her position to a ladder-climbing former college intern who has the ear of the VP and gets promoted even though he has little experience. Those who are left in the company whisper in the hallway, "That's not fair." On we go through career, marriage, home buying, parenting, and sometimes even divorce. Faced with a myriad of inequities in life, we all say at different points in our experience, "That's not fair." Finally, to get away from it all, we rejuvenate by turning on the television to NASCAR. Coming off the last caution flag, it's a shootout and our favorite driver is in the lead. We expectantly watch the restart to finish the race under both white and green flags as our favorite driver is squeezed from the line going into turn 1 by 2 of his most heated rivals, sending him into the wall. In the post-race interview following the checkered flag, taken by one of the 2 arch enemies who caused the wreck, we hear our guy exclaim, "That's not fair." Too often, well-intended Christians interpret fairness in terms of some sort of divine communism or socialism, crying foul when God doesn't disperse the opportunities and the resources of life evenly among all people. How interesting that while such people agree that each person is unique and has a particular call in his or her life, that they still desire to have every individual have the same amount of stuff, the same number of years on this earth, and the same set of circumstance, same opportunities, same answered prayers, basically the same lot in life. What if God's perspective of fair is not equal to being the same?
Everyone still wants something for nothing. Everyone feels entitled, and they feel like the only way they can be blessed is to have what someone else has. You know what I mean? Instead of embracing what they have, and maybe they'd find out how special it is if they, were a little more introspective and looked at, God gave me these abilities, gave me this position, this family on purpose, for a purpose. If I find that purpose, I might like what I have better than what they have.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't, the mentality does not change much.
Surely you are our story in the book for this topic because you lost your son to adult SIDS, and yet you didn't cry, "That's not fair," to God.
No, I didn't. I didn't think about being fair or not fair. I was just more consumed with the fact he wasn't here. And then understanding the fact, well, if he's not here, he's with Christ. So, let's just pump your brakes. Because, I would much rather for him to be with him rather than with all the craziness that's going on in our world. After being able to inhale and exhale and release him, he's in a better place. And so the not fair never came into play with me. It was just he's with him. And that had to be my focus point.
That is powerful. Reminds me of Paul saying to live as Christ, to die as gain. Well, what's fair includes 4 things from Proverbs: straight paths, blameless motives, intimacy with God, and integrity. So let's look at straight paths. Solomon passed along his father's advice, King David, and he said in Proverbs 4:11, I guide you in the way of wisdom and lead you along straight paths. Straight is interpreted from the same root word as equity, or what is fair, and it can be interpreted as smooth or evenly applied, a reference to the fashioning of metal. Paths represent our track or course of life. Typically, when we experience interpersonal conflict in our lives, 2 objects attempting to occupy the same space at the same time, we do not evenly apply the principles of risk and return between the other person and ourselves. We want them to take all the risk, and we want to get all the return. Have you ever seen that in marital counseling?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. It's so funny. When couples come in, you'd be shocked how many times they'd say, listen, this marriage can work if she would just change. I'm like, well, I see there's no problem on your side. Or they feel like everything that went wrong in the marriage, they don't see the seed that they planted for that to happen. You know what I mean? And that happens time and time again. And I think a lot of times what causes that discontentment is that they look at other people's relationships and they're seeing the highlight reels of the relationships. And they get this thing in their mind that says, well, my marriage isn't going that good. I want that marriage. Her husband never yells at her. Her husband never says this, because they're seeing the highlight reels, and so they start to get that seed of discontentment. And the next thing you know, they're saying, well, if you were like her husband, my life would be better. It's just not fair that I get stuck with you and she's got him. But she's judging him off of the highlight reels.
That's right.
She got to see what was going on in the dugout. It might be different,
That's really good. My daughter Lily, who you coach in softball, is a Division I volleyball recruit. And we've had some interesting conversations with coaches, and one of them said to her, we look first for a quality person. We are a drama-free zone. And they said, second, we look for a pretty good volleyball player. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come watch you. And this is not just one team that has shared this in some way or another. They said, we're going to come watch you, and we don't want to see your highlight reel.
Right.
They said, we want to see what happens after you've shanked a few passes and you've lost 5 points in a row. We want to see what you're like then. And that's when we'll make our decision. That I'm hearing at that level is powerful.
It is.
It's powerful. This is on my Uncle Daryl's gravestone. It's Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. So when we surrender to God, we place all the risk on him for our hearts. Like we talked about the 4 chambers of the heart, our choices, our thoughts, our prayers, our feelings. And we trust in him in all of our ways with our time, talent, and treasure. And then God responds by making our paths straight or giving us equity. And the antithesis of that is trusting in our own understanding. Curtis, do you ever struggle with trusting in your own understanding, that which you can see and touch?
No.
Versus God's?
No. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, that occasionally is a struggle. I think it's one of my biggest struggles, actually, is trusting in my own understanding and not leaning enough on him. But we talked about this in an earlier episode. Even when I learn things, I feel like my sinful nature is to turn that into my pride over having learned it. And so absolutely, I struggle all the time with not following him enough, closely enough, not giving him the credit, not trusting in him, relying on my own thoughts, words, deeds, actions, my own pride all the time.
You know, a straight path makes me think of the president of the Daytona Motor Speedway years and years ago. I was looking at it, having an auction there, a collector car auction, and he said, "Let's go." And we get in his car, and he takes me on the track. And they are like banked, huge, steep banking there. And I watch, and he goes 84 miles an hour, and the wheel's not turning as we go into turn one. And finally, I just say something. I'm young, and he's the president of Speedway, and I didn't want to say anything. I said, "Are you going to turn?" He goes, I probably said, "Are you going to turn?" He said, "No, the banking and the track is calibrated. So here at 84 miles an hour, if I keep my wheel straight, it's going to move me all along in a perfect oval." And I thought, man, that relates to this stuff.
Yes.
It's amazing that if we calibrate with God, then he's going to lead us on the straight path. I have this as a challenge in the material. Are your paths uneven? When relational conflict occurs, do you risk little in an effort to return much? Do you create your own limited scale of what is fair? If so, you are leaning on your own understanding rather than trusting in God. Straighten your paths and let God shoulder the risk. Rather than leaning on our own finite perspective, we need to trust in the Lord with all our hearts. So it's not just straight paths, but equity is also blameless motives. I'm chuckling because I'm thinking about the marriage counseling scenario again. Solomon wrote, "The righteous of the blameless makes a straight way for them, but the wicked are brought down by their own wickedness." Blameless refers to our motives, which can be defined as our desires, our intentions, our drivers, our purposes. These represent the spiritual heartbeat that connects the heart with the three resources of life, our time, talent, and treasure. So God's perspective of equity includes peering into our hearts and weighing our motives. The Apostle Paul wrote in probably couple of the most powerful verses in all of Scripture, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also the interests of others." Are we willing to be blameless in our motives, to be about the interest of others and the interest of Christ's? And unselfishly at the same time, our own interests, that's okay, but not selfishly. Are we going to have blameless motives? Do you know anybody like that? And you can't cheat and say yourself.
No.
I know. It is one of the biggest characteristics of our sinful nature, I think, is that we can't do this blameless motive thing. We will never do it on our own.
How do I do that? I'm serious because I'm thinking, how do you esteem others higher than yourself? And he just started giving me some, examples to get me on the road. Things like, you don't have to go through the door first. You don't have to get in the lane first. You can let somebody else get over. But he's building on, for me, examples of starting to do it here so that it'll grow to bigger things, because it's kind of hard to think about others higher than, when I've been taught we're all equal, But I think when it comes to And I teach kids, you're no better than anybody else. Nobody's any better than you. But to esteem somebody higher than yourself, I'm working on that right now to really understand what God is saying about that.
I think the only way you can do it is to ask for His will. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, that one kills everybody. When you pray that one, Lord, how do I honestly have pure motives?
Honestly.
Well, the only way I can do that is to say, I'm willing to accept whatever you give me.
Yeah, I think we need to confess or agree with God that our motives are not blameless.
Right.
They're full of blame.
Oh, yeah.
That's really good. Here's the checklist in this chapter. Inventory your motives. Are your motives blameless? Does interpersonal conflict cause you to first look toward your selfish interests? Or do you approach that conflict selflessly in the interest of others involved? And so it's just what Chris said. We want to ask the Holy Spirit to inventory our motives when we're in conflict. And we want to surrender those that are selfish for those that are selfless. And then we're equipped to find a wise reconciliation or resolution. So, equity is about straight paths, blameless motives, but also intimacy with God. What is fair includes intimacy with God. Its intimacy is our inner being connected with His innermost being. Solomon said in Proverbs 3:32 in the NASB, Curtis, "For the crooked man is an abomination to the Lord, but he is intimate with the upright." And upright refers to those who are fair. The NIV says intimacy with God is being taken into His confidence. King James Version says His secret is with the righteous. Amplified says His confidential communion and secret counsel. Man, it's all about intimacy with God. Just really, really clear. How does intimacy with God help you smooth out and even out that risk and return in conflict in relationships? Intimacy with God, how does that help?
That's what we were built for. He built us to be in an intimate relationship with Him. So when that's right, all other relationships will be right, and the conflict with others should go away. Certainly if everyone involved is intimate with God, but if you are, then your motive should be pure and blameless, and it should work out for good, work out for His good. But it all starts there. If you aren't right with Him, if you aren't intimate with Him, you're not going to be right and intimate with others, because all of us are flawed. We're all sinful. Getting along with other people is hard. I don't know how you get through this life without being intimate with God. It's too frustrating sometimes while being intimate with God. So the idea of navigating other people and circumstances without intimacy with God is beyond my comprehension. I don't know how people do it.
It's impossible.
I agree. Chris, does how we see God affect how we see other people?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think if you see God as your center, God is your go-to. He's the direction you want to head in. You'll have a desire to see people like He sees them. There's always that person that's the bridge person between you and someone else. Have you ever met someone you didn't really care for, then your friend liked them, and you were hanging out with your friend, and your friend somehow bridged that gap, and now you like them? You know what I mean? I think the closer you get to God and you start to see people like God sees people, and start to love people because God loves people, I think it bridges that gap, and makes people more acceptable to you.
That's fascinating. Did that just come to you?
Yeah, I guess.
Can we backtrack a little bit?
Sure.
Because just sitting here and I was saying, how do I esteem others higher? When he just reminded me that, and I spoke about this on yesterday, when he told me to do something for somebody, basically empty out my bank account. Well, he had me to give it to somebody else, and he said that was esteeming others higher than yourself, because your ministry needed financials too. But he had me to bless somebody else who was struggling in their ministry. So he just showed me
Yeah,
how he did that.
Man,
that's awesome.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
God uses, I think, 3 tools to increase our intimacy with him, and that's the Word of God, people of God, Spirit of God. It's basically what you all just said. Isn't that neat? Here's our little checklist. How well do we know God? Are we familiar with his mind, his emotions, his spirit? If we follow like a reading plan for the Bible, are we asking God, what do you want me to know, do, or change? Is it part of growing in our intimacy through him? Are we praying to God? Do we have somebody to walk through this life with and be able to say, hey, look, this is my temptation that's going on right now, or this is where I think God's calling me? The sharing that with a confidant is the difference of not falling prey to that temptation, or doing or not doing what God's calling us to do on a positive front. So this can really be convicting, yet I think what Curtis said is the whole deal, is that we were designed to have intimacy with God. So when that's not there, then things aren't going to happen the way he's designed them. So we want, with equity, straight paths, blameless motives, intimacy with God, and finally, integrity. Integrity and integer come from the same root word, so it means complete. Solomon observed, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Duplicity, I think, means to fold. So it's like there's a little bit of deceit there. We're hiding something underneath that everybody doesn't see. Solomon said in Proverbs 2:9, if you're really pursuing wisdom, then he says, then you will understand what is right, just, and fair, every good path. And those verses that precede that are like, I'm digging for it, I'm looking for it, man, I'm searching for it. And his wisdom prompts us to selflessly perceive what is fair. That's Proverbs 8:6. Do you have a story about integrity?
I don't even know where to start. There's so many. I think it's great when someone's willing to admit, when you think they've done something amazing and they really haven't. I love it when they say, no, I can't take credit for that. I didn't do that. Rather than allowing you to live on with the falsehood of thinking they've done that amazing thing. And can you imagine the battle that goes on in their mind when that happens? I mean, when your coach is about to give you credit for something, that was done, whether it be, someone taking care of the shed and rearranging everything, and the person who was supposed to do it, you walk in and go, you did an amazing job. And going through their head saying, will he ever find out if I just say thank you? It's the little things like that that impress me about players and people in my congregation. It impresses me when they're willing to say, hey, I'll be honest with you, I've been a terrible husband. This is my fault, but I want it to be right. So help me make it right. I see integrity all over that because they're owning their mistakes. They're owning their sin. And I know that person, when they get connected with God on the right level, they're going to do amazing things because the integrity is the building block for doing those amazing things, and they have it. They're willing to own that.
That's powerful. That's true. Integrity is being complete. So in order to experience integrity, we need to confess and complete. We need to confess, like you said, what I've been a terrible husband, I've been a terrible father, whatever it is that I've done, agreeing with God from his perspective for what it is, and then be completely fair to the other side of the conflict. And that'll only happen through, I believe, the Spirit of Christ in us. We're not going to do it on our own. I thought it was interesting that Coach K looks at every situation and individual discipline of the players on his team differently. He'll say if a kid was on time to practice for 3.5 seasons and for some reason he's not there, I know something came up, there's a problem, and there's going to be a decent explanation. And so I'm going to maybe handle that a little bit differently than the kid who was late. A kid would never make it late for 3.5 years in his program, but
Yeah,
a kid
I'm
who
saying.
had a problem with being late to things, and he's late again, I'm probably going to come on that pretty hard. And I like that specialized, unique, relational approach. And I know you use that too in coaching.
Absolutely.
It's nice that Coach K's following what you have.
Yeah.
So
I'm always giving him pointers.
I like that.
Yeah.
What we want to do, if we're going to experience what is fair, is we want straight paths. It's that fashioning of metal, that we're equally applying the risk and the return, not making our spouse take all the risk where we get all the return, or whoever we're in the conflict with. That we have blameless motives, and we've agreed that ain't going to happen unless we surrender our selfish motives to the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Christ, for his selfless motives. And that's where Philippians 2 comes in. And that we have intimacy with God, that we want to have that relationship where our hearts are connected with his. And like Curtis said, that's exactly what we're designed for. And then that we have integrity, that we can confess and complete. We can agree with God where we're falling short. And also in the relationship, share with that person, like you said, hey, here's where I'm falling short. But then be complete, be fair, be equitable to all parties involved. And that's our prayer for you, is that you would experience God's equity for your life as you pursue street smarts from Proverbs. Are you caught or taught in the cycle of conflict? Conflict comes from the Latin con, together, and fligra, to strike. So conflict is two objects attempting to occupy the same space at the same time. And we either get caught in that web of conflict through foolish choices, or we are taught through wise choices and growing in our wisdom. Solomon gave us the ultimate book for conflict, and it's the book of Proverbs found in the Bible. And the book of Proverbs is based on 12 words in the theme. These 12 words have transformed my life, and they can transform yours. We invite you to join us on a journey through Solomon's 12 words to the wise, so you can navigate through conflict to community.